This is by Maya Angelou, Equality.
You declare, you see me dimly, through a glass which will not shine. So I stand before you boldly, trim and rank and marking time.
You do own to hear me faintly, as a whisper out of range, while my drums beat out the message and the rhythms never change. Equality, and I will be free. Equality, and I will be free.
You announce my ways are when I fly, that I pass from man to man. But if I'm just a shadow to you, could you ever understand?
We have lived a painful history. We know the shameful past, but I keep on marching forward and you keep on coming back. Equality, and I will be free. Equality, and I will be free.
Take the blinders from your vision. Take the padding from your ears. And confess you have heard me cry. And admit you to my tears.
Hear the tempo so compelling. Hear the blood throb in my veins. Yes, my drums are beating nightly, and the rhythms never change. Equality, and I will be free. Equality, and I will be free.
Yay.
Thank you so much. And as I said before, welcome for this panel where we'll be conversing and sharing useful information, things where we could grow from and bring more unity as we face the challenging times that we're dealing with today. And Hypatia?
Hi, I'm Hypatia. How's everybody doing? You okay? So I'm a board member to the Arts Center. I'm also a therapist, and I like to think I'm a poet. Adriana is an amazing poet as well. We'll see a little bit about that a little later on. But I want to welcome you guys to a talk series that Adriana started, When It Hits Home. She first started with how do parents talk to their children about what's been going on. And today we're going to be talking about racism in the Latinx community. I want to start, and also a few rules. So, you know, this could be a conversation that we all share the same opinions on, but we may not. So I'm hoping that we can all agree that we're going to allow each other to speak, that we can agree to disagree. We all come from different experiences. I love these kinds of things as well, and because I try to make it less static. So the way that I do that, and I encourage you guys to do that, is on the bottom of your screen, there are reaction buttons. So if someone says something and you're like, that was church, or whatever it was, please feel free to use that. We also have the chat room. So if you want to share your opinions in the chat room, if you want to provide support, agreement, please, that's the sala right there, okay? So I think there's all the rules. Is that it, Adriana? I think that's it, right? Okay, so yeah. So this is not about me. It's not about Adriana. This is about you guys. So we want to open it up. We have invited 2 students from Suffolk County Community College because this is a joint effort between Teatro, Yerbabruja, and Suffolk. So we have Carla and John here, and they have so courageously and beautifully agreed to share their experiences. So I'm gonna mute myself, and you guys can decide who wants to speak first about what your thoughts are on racism in our community.
I mean, I can start. I don't mind. So I mean, I was writing down some things because I was gathering my thoughts because there's so much to touch on with this subject alone within the Latinx community. You know, it varies from, you know, different countries, like from Salvadorians to Dominicans to Puerto Ricans to Colombians, how all of us individually view each other, and how sometimes we all judge each other and have this I guess, animosity, you can say, almost against each other sometimes, from what I've noticed, at least growing up in my town. I'm from Brentwood. I've noticed a lot of, different feelings towards each other, and judgment and prejudice, almost like prejudice against, like, for example, me, whenever I said, hey, I'm Salvadorian, they would say, whoa, you're MS-13, or you this, or you that. Same thing goes for Colombians. Are you Colombian? Are you a drug dealer? All these things were something that I grew up hearing in my town very often, especially within my town. There was a lot of like gang activity. So there was a lot of different Latin gangs that were get together, and it was, I think it caused a rift and almost separated us all instead of uniting us all in, growing up in my town, I feel. But now with everything going now, I feel like we're all just kind of getting over that and sticking together to be a part of the BLM movement. But definitely, like, one of the things that I feel hit me, that made me realize that racism was very alive and true within Hispanics in the Latin community, was when my sister had her her boyfriend. He's half Honduran and half Haitian, and his father is, he's a lot darker than we are. So for my family, my mom was like, oh my God, at first had a lot to say, a lot of like negative comments, and she's like, my niece is gonna, my granddaughter's gonna be black. And I was just like, are you kidding me? Like, it was a very shocking, eye-opening, and almost heartbreaking thing for me to hear coming from my mother, because I look up to her. And it was like a wake-up call, but it was something that I definitely would address with her, and call her out and be like, that's not right. Like, why would you ever, first of all, it's a child. Second of all, what does it matter what color of the skin? We're just so lucky to be having a beautiful baby come into this world. I never even thought of it like that. And well, my father, he's very old school, like old school Salvadorian, where he is like, you cannot mix our race with another race. Like, how dare you? You're pathetic if you do that. Where he said like very mean, hurtful things, like, to me, where it caused an issue in our actual relationship, where I can't even really answer his messages, because it's so toxic to continue to even be a part of. Regardless, it doesn't matter if it's family. That's the way I see it. It's like, I love you, Father, I appreciate you, but I'm not going to live like you did, and I'm not going to stand for that. And this is what I stand for, and this is what I believe in. And I don't care what color of your skin. I'm not looking at that. I'm just looking to love people, and I appreciate people, and I look beyond that. I don't look at people because of the color of their skin. And that's something that, I felt like did cause a very, I guess, it caused problems in our relationship. Like, me and my father don't really speak anymore, and me, my boyfriend's actually Irish and Italian, so that's a whole different story. But to him, he's like, you guys are disgraceful. How dare you? If he's not Salvadorian, then, you're doing it wrong. And that's something that I lived with, and I mean, currently it's still happening, but I chose to just do what I want to do for myself, and I'm not letting him stop me, and I'm happy, and I choose to love people no matter what, and that's not going to ever change. And in our community, I think that it's important to inform the youth, but also allow them to know that it's okay for, to have disagreements, but it's also okay to teach your parents and speak to your parents, because a lot of the older parents, are old school. They don't like to hear it, but it has to be learned. We can't continue to live with so much hate, or we will never move forward as a community in general. We will never get the recognition that we deserve if we all don't stick together, because hate won't get us anywhere. It would just keep us apart, and it would just continue to cause more problems in the long run, and we will never be able to come together as a community to fight for something. Like, for example, like, as a community, if we really, like, not saying that people don't, but for the whole ICE situation, with the whole immigration thing, like, if we all stick together, if it wasn't just like, oh, it's only about the Mexicans, it's only about people in Honduras and El Salvador, then you know what? And if no one else wants to join in, then how are we ever going to be heard as a Latin community? So that's another thing that I see. Like, if we can all look past these, where we come from, where we're from, whatever island, whoever, like, it's just, I feel like we would be so much more powerful of a strength, and we would make a big difference. We would have a big movement, just like BLM. So that's really my take on that for now. So thank you for listening.
Thank you, Carla. And if I may, I just want to point out, you are so right. And I think many of us could relate. I remember hearing so many times that we had to arreglar la raza. If you don't fix the race, then you're doing something wrong. I also remember something that I was a little younger and I paid little mind to because it's one of those subtle ways. But I used to hear how a couple of my cousins were called la crema innata de la familia, like the cream of the cream from the family.
Wow.
And then as I became a teenager, I was like, but wait, what does that mean? I'm not la crema innata? Why? What makes me different? And, all those, the same issues, the same things, I think. And I'm from Dominican Republic. So there's, that's a whole issue there with the history. And just to close up and give the other student the chance to speak up, I think it's a lack of appreciation of our own history and recognizing, and appreciating our heritage.
Yes, I agree. 100%.
And it's interesting, and then we're going to go to John, but also just so Adriana and I are both Dominican, right? But visually, right? Like I never get, oh, you're Dominican, right? You look this way. I used to get my hair done at certain places and I would hear other people say, oh, mira, tú tienes pelo bueno, and blah, 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 and all this kind of stuff. And it's just like, well, what is that, right? And I think now, especially in Dominican Republic, right, there was a protest there and, people got arrested. And that's a Black country, right, having a hard time kind of managing that. So I feel you, but I did hear, you talking about this generational like indoctrination, right? The old school and how they were taught, and how a lot of the young people are struggling with that because that doesn't vibe now anymore. And also, how powerful would we be if we were unified? So, thank you, John.
Oh, there you go. All right. I just want to say thank you for letting me speak at this event today. And it took me, the questions that I was trying to prepare to answer, I was having a hard time trying to answer them because I've not been used to being asked about what I think of, like, what's my opinion on race and what is it that I've dealt with because of being Hispanic. Because I'm also Dominican. Both my parents are Dominican, so, and then that made me like think back to like anything that I've seen or like I've experienced. So then I remembered when I first started school in kindergarten, until third grade, I was put in ESL, even though I didn't speak any Spanish at all. And I was, at the time, I thought, oh, this is normal. Like, because I have I have Spanish speaking parents at home. They must know that. So they put me in ESL. But like all the other kids were from El Salvador, Honduras, or Guatemala, and they spoke Spanish. And when they tried speaking to me, I'm like, I don't really know what you're saying. I don't speak Spanish. And then the teacher, she got mad at me at times because she thought I was like just being mean to the other kids and not talking to them. But I'm like, no, I really don't speak. I don't know how to speak. I could understand, but I couldn't speak. So that's what I realize now. And then my sister, she had it even worse, where she was put in ESL from kindergarten until 8th grade. And because of that, she suffered in some of her grades for English because they put more focus on ESL than on her other classes. And she's still mad about that even today. She's 28 years old. So that made me realize just how like the education system right now, like in this country, is like, it just doesn't, it just assumes just because you have Spanish speaking parents or because you speak Spanish at home doesn't mean that means you have to speak Spanish, or like that's what I realized. And then also I realized all the times that once I was able to speak a little bit of Spanish, like I was put as like the translator for my parents or of the family, like going to doctor's appointments, going to the supermarket, going to just anywhere where my mom had to, you know, it was no one really spoke English, like in the hospitals as well, healthcare, that's a very big thing. Um, so I would always have to translate, like, and that every time I did, like, I was always nervous because whenever my mom speaks Spanish, like she's as a Dominicans are very loud, so they so even when they're trying not to be, they're loud. So every time she spoke to me, like people would like look, and when I would speak to her, they would look, because before I was pretty white, like right now I'm very tan. I've been tan for a couple of years, but when I was young, I was very white. And so they would kind of take back, like they were surprised I spoke Spanish. Um, and then that made me a bit nervous to like not want to speak or to translate. And I even remember one time in the supermarket, I was actually embarrassed by my mom speaking Spanish. And I actually told her like, hey mom, can you like, puede callar un poquitico? Like, and she just looked at me. I was like, and she just like laughed a little. And then now I realize like that's terrible that I told her not to speak Spanish, like her native tongue, like because I was just embarrassed. Like that's something I regret doing. Um, that that was that. So that's some things that made me realize that. And then even within my own family, how like race is viewed. I know Carla mentioned it before, where like, oh, if you're from like this Hispanic country, they don't like this one. So, like, for my parents, and like also with like family, like who you marry, who you go out with. So my middle, or my second oldest sister, she started dating this Honduran guy, and my parents did not want to know anything of him. They did not want her to date him. They would always like just say like, "Oh, why is he here? What you don't know what he's like. You don't know if like he's in a gang. You don't know like if he's dangerous." And then now I realize like at that time, none of my cousins were dating anyone other than Dominicans. They didn't have friends other than Dominicans. Like no one married outside of Dominicans. So, but eventually, like now, that was like about 5 years ago, and now they're married. They have to be happy now because they can't say anything. And now they actually like him. So they just had to get used to him because they just had this preconceived notion in their head that like people other than Dominicans are just, they're not good. You can't dañar la raza, como así. Y um, that's what I try to think of. And I also thought of just how race is viewed. I know in the Dominican Republic, there's three main like people you'll find: people that are more white, that are like closer to Spanish heritage, like from Europe; tan people, more from like Taino, indigenous, and then more people that are black, like from the African slaves that are brought here. And I have, and my whole family's of all three. And I know that Dominicans, when they're asked, like black Dominicans, when they're asked, "Oh, you're black, right? You're from African heritage." They're like, "No, I'm Dominican. No, yo soy dominicano. Yo no soy negro." I'm like, "Well, have you looked in a mirror lately? Like, I don't know what you call that." So it's like they don't view race as race is viewed here in the United States. Like it's very different. But then I remember once one of my uncles came here about 2 years ago. He moved here. My parents brought him over to, have a better life here. And then one day he like first 5 days him here, he's like, "Why? ¿Por qué hay tantos haitianos aquí? Like, why are there so many Haitians?" I'm like, "What do you mean Haitians?" He's like, sí, todo eso, ellos ahí. I'm like, oh, you mean like the black people? They're like, no, they're not Haitian. They're they were born here. They're not even related to Haitians, like close. They're like, oh, see, like, because there's like that mentality, like over there on the island, like if you're black and you don't speak Spanish, then you're automatically Haitian. And I know like Dominicans, Haitians do not like each other at all. There's a big hate for that. And my parents, yeah, my parents, they never really spoke to me about race or about like how to treat other people. I really got that from school, like our elementary school and middle school. That's when like race was being talked of and like how you should treat everyone equally. We're all the same. But in the house, I wasn't really talked to about that. But the only thing they mentioned was like stereotypes of other people, and that's it. And like, and that I was always told like, and I just like I knew like what they were saying wasn't right. Like they would say, um, like, oh, they would always joke to my sisters like, oh, te consigo un novio americano, and by americano they meant white, because they're like, oh, tienen mucho dinero. They're like they want them to marry. If it wasn't Dominican, there's gotta be like a white person, because then you'll have a good life. Like, and a lot of the my family thought like, oh, if you're white, you're automatically rich and you'll be good, you'll be set to life. But yeah, that's it's just like a lot of preconceived notions about race, and like different races and stereotypes. But then also like once you're here, like to me, everything that I went through in school and all that I thought was normal. That's why I was having such a hard time thinking of things like what have I gone through, because I thought I didn't really go through anything like severe. Like I never had anything direct saying like someone didn't like me because I'm Hispanic or I'm Dominican. It was never anything direct. It was always indirect.
Always the subtle ways of
Yeah.
representing all the different things. And with that thought, because I could also, we could totally relate. I think Hypatia will relate also when you mentioned the relationship between Haitians and Dominicans. And I feel saddened every time, because I grew up with people making fun of me or trying to use oh, tú eres una haitiana, as if it were an insult. And I remember being a very young girl and just saying, but why would they even say that if it's okay? I could be a Haitian and I will still be proud. It's, it should have never be as an insult or as a way of putting someone down. And I just want to share with you something from Lorgia Garcia Peña. She's a professor at Harvard University in literary studies. And she says the common practice of referring to Latinos, Latinx, as a race rather than as an arbitrary conglomerate of ethnic and racially diverse people who trace their origins to Latin American further erases Black Latinx from literally every space, institution, and possibility of representation. We are an invisibilized minority within a minority, but that invisibility does not prevent Black Latinx from being targeted by both racist police and immigration authorities. Black Latinx exemplify exactly how anti-immigration and anti-Blackness intersect in our present world. And just to kind of throw it out there and see if anyone has any additional thoughts on that. Because I felt that kind of, gave us the general thought of how, we mix the things between nationality and race and all the other issues right under it.
Can I speak?
But this might be also a good time to bring in because I'm sure they have so much to say on that issue, because that's so important, right? That, that intersection of our identities, right?